OPEPP's webinar series, Learning About Paras from Michael Giangreco. This is the second webinar in the series. It's based on questions and answers about Dr. Giangreco's article, Paraprofessionals in Inclusive Schools, Are We Addressing Symptoms or Causes? I'm Amy Howley, one of the consultants working with the Ohio Partnership for Excellence in Paraprofessional Preparation at the University of Cincinnati's Systems Development and Improvement Center. Here's Michael Giangreco's photo. Dr. Giangreco is a professor in the Department of Education at the University of Vermont and is also affiliated with the Center on Disability and Community Inclusion. In your article, you reported statistics about the way paraprofessionals use their time. As I understand it, time use of school personnel can tell us a lot about their roles and functions. Did anything you discovered about the use of parapros and special education teachers' time surprise or worry you?
Yes, absolutely. One of the first things that we saw from our data was that special ed paraprofessionals were spending a greater percentage of their time in instruction than were the special education teachers with whom they worked. So right off the bat, you're talking about, greater percentage of instruction from those folks.
So if the parapros are doing more of the teaching, what are the teachers doing? What did your research show?
The other thing that was very interesting, and this has come up in this study and a number of other studies actually, is that paraprofessionals spent substantially less time doing clerical tasks than the special educators with whom they worked. And as I mentioned, we found this in other studies where we observed, for example, during the middle of the school day, the special ed teacher with a master's degree was at the copy machine making copies of materials for class while the paraprofessional was engaged in small group instruction. And what's kind of interesting about this is when you dive deeper into some of the qualitative research on this, it happens for, in essence, a very positive reason. People in schools were trying to demonstrate their respect for paraprofessionals by not asking them to do what they consider to be, quote, menial tasks. So what's interesting is what people think of as menial tasks have to be done by someone, and who makes sense to do them. The other thing is characterizing these tasks as menial, I think, is a problem in and of itself. If something is important enough that it must be done by someone and someone's going to get paid to do it, it's not menial. And so one of the things we really want to encourage teachers and special educators to communicate when they're asking paraprofessionals to engage in things like clerical tasks or supervision of students on the playground or cafeteria duty or whatever it is to help them understand that they are providing an important support to the teacher and or special educator, allowing them time to collaborate with one another and in some cases to work directly with students who have disabilities.
It sounds like it's important to distinguish between the work that's involved in teaching and the work that's involved in supporting teaching. Maybe the examples on the slide can help show the distinction. On the teaching side, the work involves developing lessons, selecting instructional materials, and designing assessments. On the supporting the teaching process side, the illustrative work involves helping a student write down answers on a worksheet or test and reviewing a lesson with a student using materials the teacher has provided. These supporting the teaching process activities are the sorts of tasks that might fit within a parapro's scope of work. So what else did you find in the study?
The other thing that we found that was in some ways counterintuitive was that one-to-one paraprofessionals actually spent less of their time in instruction than did classroom or program-based paraprofessionals. So presumably when a paraprofessional is assigned one-to-one to a student in a very dedicated fashion, I think some people might think that they're getting more instructional time. But it's not exactly what's happening. So just because the student has a one-to-one paraprofessional, people shouldn't assume that they're getting more intensive instruction or a greater percentage of instruction. And it's something we need to dive more deeply into.
Summarizing what you've said so far, it seems like students with disabilities are getting less of their instruction from teachers and more from parapros. But if they're assigned a one-on-one parapro, they're actually getting even less teaching than they would if they were in a classroom that was served by one or more classroom or program-based parapros. Maybe it's too stark to say it this way, but it almost seems like students with disabilities get less high-quality instruction than those who don't have disabilities, and students with the most complex disabilities get the least amount of high-quality instruction. What were the parapros in the study spending their time doing?
The special ed paraprofessionals were spending a higher percentage of their time, quite substantially so, dealing with behavior issues and providing behavior supports than the special educators. If my memory serves me, they were spending about 3 times as much time the paraprofessionals were than the special educators.
Why was this so important?
This is important for a couple of reasons. One is it may point to areas of professional development where we might want to focus our efforts to help our paraprofessionals be more prepared to deal with these things. But also it suggests some kind of root problems. The whole idea of this article, or kind of the framing of the title of the article, is that we're dealing with symptoms, not causes. And so often when people see challenges related to paraprofessionals, they want to go right to how do we train them better, what should we be training them on, and certainly training paraprofessionals is an important thing to do, but oftentimes it doesn't really solve the root problem.
Could we talk a little bit more about the root problem?
Assigning a paraprofessional may in fact just delay attention to the root problems. It might not be the paraprofessionals we need to be looking at. It may be the teachers and special educators and how the systems are set up.
When you mention that the root problem relates to how the systems are set up, I suspect you were talking about how staffing is set up by districts. At least that would be my hunch based on what I've read of your work. Some possible concerns would be the number of teachers in comparison to the number of parapros, in other words, staffing levels, the nature of special educators and general educators' work, and the arrangements in place for coaching and supporting both teachers and parapros. So what else did your study find out about how parapros were spending their time?
We found that paraprofessionals spent a substantial amount of their time self-directed, not operating from the plans that were prepared by professionals. And so, again, this has been replicated in a variety of other studies where we hear a lot of stories from paraprofessionals as well as teachers and special educators who tell us that so often paraprofessionals are given really minimal direction about what to do. They're kind of expected to watch what happens and figure it out and adapt for students, and they're doing a lot without operating from professionally prepared plans. And so I think that that's a concern area that we should be looking at. Let me remind you that these data were collected in what we would characterize as inclusion-oriented schools. Typically, these were schools that had regular class placement rates that exceeded the national average, and many were in the 70 to 90% of the students with disabilities being included in regular class, at least 80% of the time or more. But one of the things that we found in these schools, and this has been replicated over several studies that we've done on this topic, here in Vermont and across some other states as well, is that in these inclusion-oriented schools, on average, only about 2% of a special educator's time is available for supervision per paraprofessional, which means that basically the paraprofessionals are on their own. So, unlike kind of old-style special class models of special education, where the special ed teacher is there all day with the special ed paraprofessionals to supervise them and direct them and so on. That's not the case in more inclusion-oriented schools. The special educator is typically distributed across other classrooms, and also they often have multiple paraprofessionals that they are supporting in different locations. And again, it's been consistent over a series of studies that on average they're only getting about 2% of a special educator's time for hiring. So again, they're on their own and they're not getting the level of supervision. So if we're going to hire people, we need to make sure that we're able to supervise them. And, in combination, these findings and data from this study as well as other studies suggest that the substantial investment made in hiring paraprofessionals is not always being used wisely.
So it seems to be a systems problem relating to the staffing strategies that school districts are using to address the needs of all students, including students with disabilities. Could better training and supervision of parapros solve the problem?
I want to be clear that this is not the fault of the paraprofessionals and that these issues won't be solved merely by better training of paraprofessionals. As I said before, this seems to be a go-to response. Like, you've got a problem, go to the, training the paraprofessionals, clarifying their roles, supervising them better. All good things to do, but probably are really not getting at the root causes.
That's an important reminder, Michael. Thank you for sharing your research about how parapros and special education teachers use their time. It seems like your research offers a couple of recommendations for districts. I've included them on the slide. First, districts should support teachers in their major functions: planning instruction, delivering instruction, assessing instruction, and managing behaviors. Second, districts should encourage teachers to give parapros work responsibilities that support, but do not supplant, the major functions of the teacher. Third, districts should use staffing strategies that allow teachers to take charge of instruction and behavior management with the help of parapros. Fourth, one-to-one assignment of parapros may limit the high-quality instruction that students with complex needs require and to which they are entitled. Fifth, problems with staffing are systems problems. District leaders need to be the ones to find workable solutions. Finally, training parapros is a good thing to do, but it doesn't solve systems problems.